Welcome to the Microgreens Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Jonah Malden. Together, we'll explore the art of turning tiny seeds into a thriving microgreens empire, sharing insights, coveted secrets, and strategic wisdom from building one of Canada's largest microgreens farms. Stay tuned for thought-provoking conversations with leading figures in the world of microgreens. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. On today's episode, we have Smita Das from Giant Gorilla Greens in Boston, Massachusetts. On this episode, we're going to be talking about diversity in product offerings, the benefits of using distributors for a sales route, the importance of having guidance from other farms in the startup phase of your business, and so much more. Let's get right into it. Welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to have you on, Smita.
Thank you, Jonah. I am super excited for this conversation.
Awesome. So I'd love to start just by hearing kind of how you got into microgreens, how you found out about it, and how Giant Gorilla Greens came to be the farm it is today.
Yeah, of course. My husband and I used to grow microgreens just for ourselves. Uday, he was basically looking for something a little more like nutrient dense that is like easily accessible in the sense that growing something indoors yourself is like a whole lot different from like going to the store, and you're self-sufficient. One of the ideas behind microgreens was that we eat a mostly like a whole foods plant-based diet, and we try to eat really healthy. It helps me support my chronic condition. And I manage it mostly through my diet. I take very minimal medication. And the first kind of interest in microgreens was mainly because they are like nutrient dense. So it was kind of like a solution for us. We started out growing it just for ourselves. And in 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and we were spending more time at home, so Uday used to work in tech, and he was obviously like very easily able to work from home. And I used to be a flight instructor, so I couldn't do any work remotely, so I had extra time, and I started growing more microgreens. And we kind of thought this was our way of helping our community. So we were growing excess and we were just giving it away to our neighbors. And they would, like buy. So they were actually taking it every week. We weren't necessarily selling it. And at some point, one of our neighbors offered us money, and he was like, "This is something you could sell." And that's when our interest kind of shifted a little bit, and we put up a Shopify store. And we did a little bit of like Facebook ads in the beginning, and that's kind of just how we got started. So.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Did you start growing microgreens before the pandemic, and then it became more of a business as you grew it during the early phases of the pandemic? So your business started in 2020, but you were growing microgreens prior to that?
Yeah. So before that, it was really just for us. We weren't selling it. We weren't like giving it away to anybody. And like in March 2020, I think it was maybe like June 2020 when we, were growing a lot and just giving it away to people. And at that point, it kind of things shifted a little bit. And we started growing more in the house. And then at some point, I think maybe a year and a half in, we outgrew our basement,
Awesome.
and we decided to like lease a space like close to our house. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's been great seeing your journey from when we first met maybe a couple years ago to when you got the space to how your farm has succeeded and done really cool things, and in the last few years it's been really cool to watch that kind of happen almost live. It's been amazing to watch your journey from the sidelines rather than kind of doing it like I've done myself, actually running a farm and kind of being so in it that it's hard to see what you've created over those years. So it's been really cool watching your farm grow over the last few years.
Thank
But
you. Honestly, I feel like, we were like very inspired when we came across your farm. And I think that seeing your farm, it played a very big role in us kind of having the faith to take that leap.
that's really cool. I didn't know that, but I'm very flattered. That's awesome that just by farming, I was able to inspire you and hopefully other farms to automate and to find efficiencies and do things in a way that makes it much more enjoyable to be a microgreens farmer daily, rather than kind of it being a grind and having kind of doing it on your own the way I did it. I wish I had help along the way. So it's very rewarding to see that happen and know how much of an impact that, Living Earth and the work I've done has been able to help. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'd love to hear about kind of your customer breakdown, like if you started with direct to consumer and then if you moved to restaurants, kind of what your trajectory on customers were and what they are right now.
We definitely did start out with direct to consumer since that was the pandemic and everything was pretty much like lockdown. So we started out doing home deliveries. And I think the one good thing that helped us right in the beginning was from the get-go, we were a subscription model, and we had people sign up. I would say even today, 90% of our direct to consumer is on a recurring basis. So the orders recur either weekly or bi-weekly. And I think that was a great way to start because it guarantees you a certain revenue every month. And I think today the bulk of our revenue comes from food service. We do a little bit of retail. I do think there's a lot of room to expand in retail. But we have kind of found it challenging to break into like chain retail. So, we're looking at maybe speaking with a broker or looking at other avenues. So right now, I think that food service happens to be our biggest customer, and we don't work with restaurants directly. We did that for a very, very short amount of time, and I think that to us it felt a little tedious, dealing with like restaurants individually. So we work with some distributors who will distribute it for us, and I think that for our business model that works out better.
For sure. I kind of took a similar path with working with restaurants for a short period of time, kind of seeing what the workload was from the logistics and relationship management of working with restaurants directly, and decided pretty fast as well to go through distributors. I feel that the more farms I've talked to, some people really like building the relationship with the chefs and find a lot of
Yeah,
satisfaction with it. I've had some farms I've talked to even years ago that they just love working with restaurants. It's very
yeah,
satisfying for them to have
yeah,
their microgreens be on a dish and work with the chef to create the it's like what microgreens work well with what dishes. And it's very satisfying. But from a business perspective, it can be very time consuming. So
yeah,
I think there's like kind of finding the balance between doing what you love and making it run as an efficient business. So distributors are a great way to get into food service. It's almost no work compared to working directly with restaurants. What's the rough split between the customers right now?
I think that about 50% of our business, maybe a little more, is food service. Um, and then I think the rest of it is probably evenly split between direct to consumer and retail.
One thing I've kind of learned, not necessarily on purpose, but kind of by accident, was especially when the pandemic hit, is it's really nice to have a split between restaurant customers in whatever capacity, whether it's distributors or working directly with them and retail customers. Because when
Yeah.
the pandemic hit, farms that were exclusively restaurant got hit really hard. A lot of them, unfortunately, went under because they had no customers. So by having a mix of the two, it kind of diversifies the risk. Now, no one obviously saw the pandemic coming, but just going forward, knowing that that risk or some sort of other risk is there in terms of
Yeah.
one customer being more in demand than another, or having the product be more in demand, it's just really nice to be able to have that diversity in customer base. It can make it or break it situation for your farm in situations like the pandemic. And farms that had a diversity had a much easier time going through that difficult situation than farms that were solely focused on food service.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree. Yep.
So, given your several years of experience growing microgreens and now running giant gorilla greens, have you gained any insights on trends or preferences on the restaurant or consumer side? And did those shape your product offerings at all?
Yeah, for sure. I think there are some very interesting differences. Um, in so where we are, I feel like in food service, it looks like the most popular product is the rainbow mix, which we call the house mix, but it's more popularly known as the rainbow mix. So that definitely is our top seller. Like, there's no doubt about that. Um, and then I've noticed that our direct to consumer, I believe it's a very educated consumer. They seem to have done their research and they're likely eating it for health reasons. We've done interviews with them, and their micro broccoli seems to be the most popular. Um, and then in retail, it seems like the mixes are pretty popular. So either the rainbow mix or something like a salad mix. Um, and I think micro arugula as well does really well in retail. So it's interesting how, people have like different choices depending on where you are. If we're at the farmer's market, again, we see the rainbow mix being like a top seller. Um, so I think, some people might appreciate, the beauty and, the vibrant colors of the rainbow mix. And we do add some basil into that. So it makes it a little herby as well.
Oh, that's nice.
So I think they kind of appreciate that. But then there's this other consumer as well who's all about like health food. And we're like that too. So we always have micro broccoli at home. So yeah, those are just some of the trends that I have noticed.
I find there is sometimes differences between local area to local area, especially
Hmm.
north south with something like basil. Like basil is generally more popular in the north because
Yeah.
you can't grow it most of the year, like any kind of basil. But broccoli is seems to be across the board the most popular for retail because of how much information there is. There's podcasts on with Dr. Rhonda Patrick on Joe Rogan
Yeah.
talking about how crazy nutrient dense broccoli, microgreens, and sprouts are.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason because, in my opinion, I think cabbage microgreens and kale microgreens must be as nutrient dense, if not more nutrient dense than broccoli microgreens, based
Right.
on um, the other research I've done online. But everyone knows about broccoli microgreens. So there's kind of this interesting mix where it may not be the absolute most healthy microgreen, but it's the most popular. So it's the same thing, like blueberries are well known in the fruit
Yeah.
world as being extremely high in antioxidants. But when I eat a blackberry and I see all the pigment in it, I'm like, a blackberry's got to be very similarly,
Yep.
if not higher, in certain phytonutrients than blueberries, but they don't have that marketing behind them. Maybe because they're
Right.
not as flavorful or they're not as exciting of a fruit as blueberries. But a lot of it ends up being marketing. But broccoli microgreens, generally speaking, tend to be the most popular microgreen for retail. And for me personally, like they're like me as well. I always have them at home and just use them in smoothies and salads. They're so versatile in
Yeah.
wraps, and you can eat like a ton of them. and
Yeah.
feel not even feel like you're eating a lot of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That is interesting though. I definitely have to look into like cabbage and kale. They all fall into like cruciferous vegetables, which, that's what we say about the salad mix, that it's like a microgreen of all the cruciferous vegetables. Um, and there's so much research behind that as well. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that from people that are interested in microgreens from a health perspective is I've learned this the hard way. If you, let's say you eat a lot of broccoli microgreens, but you're not eating any other type of microgreen, you're going to be getting a lot of specific types of phytonutrients. And then if so, eating a diversity of different microgreens will give you much better health benefits than eating the same type of microgreen every week. Now, obviously, people are going to have preferences in flavor and texture, but
Yeah.
the more diverse microgreens you eat, the better your health will most likely be. Just like the more diverse inputs of types of fertilizers you put in the soil, the more diverse the bacteria and therefore the nutrition the plants will be. So diversity is seems to be the theme in this podcast so far, but it can
Yeah.
really have a big impact on soil and on your health by consuming a more diverse array of microgreens.
But I would say that 100% makes sense. I think I'm gonna, you know, start making that recommendation to our customers as well.
Awesome. So I'd love to hear kind of what an average week looks like as a microgreens business owner, and what what you do on a weekly basis and what kind of changes on a weekly basis.
Um, as far as farm operations go, each day of the week kind of looks the same. So Monday is usually a harvest day, so every Monday will be a harvest day. And then we have designated delivery days. We have days that we do farmers markets. And we're not doing a lot of markets this year. We're doing like two, so we have 2 days a week that we go to the markets. Each day of the week kind of is predictable, but I think that things are always kind of changing and you have to be on your toes. Sometimes you'll find like an odd tray that seems to, have an issue, and then you have to kind of figure out like what changed or, what is going on. It's challenging. I think, you have to stay on top of things, and having a good team is everything. So at this point, my husband Uday and I are working together, and I think that what's great is that he brings like a whole different kind of perspective. So I am somebody who likes to look at the bigger picture, and he is somebody who's very detail oriented. So it's very different. So I appreciate his take on a lot of things that I kind of may not be looking at as closely. Having a great team can make life at the farm so much easier.
That's
Yeah.
definitely a very great piece of advice for anyone that is still in the phase of doing everything themselves. Whether you have a partner like yourself that can help, or you hire a team, it makes it so much easier. So, just a very interesting side story. I was on my own for I think 4.5 years before I actually hired my first staff. I just automated as much
Okay.
as I could. So
Yeah.
it was a bit of a lonely journey, but I remember I didn't get sick very often because I took care, for the most part of my nutrition. In some ways I couldn't allow myself to get sick, but
Right.
there
Yep.
was one time I had a stomach flu, and I remember this was pretty close to when I ended up starting hiring staff for the farm. I had a
Right.
stomach flu, and it was a Saturday, and there was a bunch of it was during busy season in the winter. There was a bunch of soil that needed to be mixed and work that needed to be done. And I remember being really sick, but I had no choice. I had to go in. And
Yeah.
I remember
Yep.
doing work for 5 minutes, sitting down, doing work for 5 minutes,
Oh
sitting down,
God.
because it was
Wow.
so
Yep.
I felt so sick, but like I had no choice. So even just from a lifestyle perspective, when you get to a certain scale that you can't afford to hire people, I highly recommend to do that because if you plan on growing microgreens and expanding your business for, 1 year, 2 years, or many years to come, it's inevitable that something like that's going to happen, even if you're in pretty good health condition and you don't really get sick very often, like I didn't. It can still happen, and I wish I had someone back then to rely on. And then also having a business partner is one thing that would have
Yeah.
been really nice to
Yep.
have someone to bounce ideas off of. So, I have a lot of friends and family that I could do that with. That was great. That have run businesses or that worked in the corporate world and can bring a different perspective to the challenges going through. But I think the core message is like having a team, whether you're their friends and family or um, hired staff to help run the business will make life so much easier as a business owner.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, you know, like before Uday joined the business, I did have, like I had hired someone. Um, and right now we have someone that comes in part-time and they help us basically do things that are either very challenging for us, something like washing and sanitizing the trays. That is something that, takes it's a lot of physical work. And I think that, we feel like our time, maybe we have like a 6-year-old as well. So we have a lot on our plate. And I think there's only so much we can kind of take on. So there are things like, some of the driving has been outsourced as well. Um, so I think definitely like depending on our situation, I think somebody with a family definitely needs to outsource some work. And I totally agree. Like, there has to be, at least like something you can fall back on if you end up getting sick. Like that happened with us as well. Um,
And I think on top of that, another way to look at it, which I find is helpful because from what I've seen, most small business owners, including microgreens growers, want to do as much as they can themselves because they feel like that's why they started the business, right? To grow food, and that's where a
yeah,
lot of the joy and excitement comes from for me, and I think for most farms is actually doing the day to day work. But
yeah,
it comes to a point where if let's say if you value your time for what it's worth in the business and you can spend your time doing sales and hire
yeah,
someone for whatever the market wage is to do the manual labor, if you can 5x your return on time by focusing on sales and then hiring someone to do the day-to-day tasks, the return on your time is much higher. Instead of just producing the product for your current customers, you can actually expand to more customers. So there's a much higher return on that type of work. And I find it's helpful to kind of look through a different lens and just kind of plant that seed in farm owners' minds that they have to kind of at a certain point make that decision if they want to continue to mostly be a farmer or to run a microgreens business. And it's often a hard decision because most people just want to grow food, and that's what's exciting. And some of the stuff running a business, HR and accounting and sales is not necessarily always as exciting, but it'll allow you to get to a point where you can do the tasks that are the most valuable for the business. Um,
yeah. Definitely. I think it's really important to kind of keep your head outside of the operations as well and think beyond just the day-to-day ops.
100%. I think
Yeah.
that's really good advice for anyone that's in the day to day. And now that I've sold my farm, uh, even just from taking a step back for the few months that have occurred since then, there's so many things I see now I could have done differently, just having the
Okay.
time away from the business. So the more time you can take, whether it's just 2 or 3 days a week that you can work on the business rather than in the business, or if you're able to take, a week or two off, I found most of the big decisions I made on expanding the business, starting to hire staff have always been when I'm on vacation. and I'm actually outside of the day to day, which is kind of ironic given that you think
Yeah.
you would make decisions when you're in the business, but it's really when you're outside of it and you can kind of look at it from a bird's eye view that you can really make those decisions and make them with clarity. Usually, I find there's always something that a microgreens farm does a bit unique from other farms. I think most microgreen farms follow other farms on social media and see how the average farm runs. But I wonder if there's anything unique or unusual in your production or equipment you've adopted in your business that you think is unique to Giant Gorilla.
I think we used to do a lot of consulting with your farm, Living Earth Farms, and I think that that helped us kind of cut our learning curve. And I think it was um, time and resources very well spent. Um, and I think that right now, when problems crop up, we troubleshoot from all aspects and we'll ask for help. Um, Either from someone like you who we've consulted with, or we have a greenhouse supply store that will sometimes help us troubleshoot problems. um, I think everybody kind of has to adapt to their environment. So when we leased our space, we did not kind of look into things like having a floor drain. And so our facility, we've kind of adapted. I think if somebody visits the farm, they may see us doing things a little bit differently to kind of adapt to those kind of deficiencies.
Well, just from knowing more about your farm, if I were to look at what I've seen, I think your packaging is very, very unique. It's, in my opinion, the most beautiful microgreens packaging I've seen. So if anyone would like to get some inspiration at what a really well designed retail packaging looks like, feel free to check out Giant Green Gorilla's website or their Instagram and take a look at their packaging. I remember spending a lot of time designing Living Earth's packaging. And then when you guys came out with yours, I was like blown away at how well designed it is and how, like, if I was in a grocery store, my eyes would go right to your product. Which
Oh,
is really
cool.
important
Okay.
in the retail
Yeah.
side. So I think you're set up for expanding into retail. And for anyone that's interested, I think that's really something unique about your farm that I really haven't seen to that extent of how well it's designed.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to know that it's like eye-catching, and that was kind of the goal. But I'm going to be honest again, when I saw your packaging, that's where I kind of got this idea that I want something that's going to be on a transparent sheet so that you can see the product. When you look at the front of the box, I want people to see the product. Um, so we did draw some inspiration from like your packaging.
That's awesome. And I draw
Yeah.
inspiration from the bigger growers at the time. So
Okay.
that's why I love collaboration, because a lot of people think like another local grower where in Ontario where I am, or another local grower in the Boston, Massachusetts area would be competition, but there's ways to collaborate and have it not be that kind of competition mindset and actually learn from each other. And that's, part of this podcast, but also I think a mentality shift I had once my farm was large enough that I could see like, oh, like I don't need to think of other farms as competition. I can think of them as inspiration or as friends or as colleagues that I can talk to and troubleshoot and help out. I think that's one thing I really love about the microgreens community is how much of that there is. And the contrast between that and the large scale vertical farms that all have proprietary intellectual property that you can't go visit
Yeah.
their farm ever. You can't see how they actually grow. It's like behind this
Yeah.
closed curtain. And I feel like microgreens farms are much more open. They're often owner operated or something close to that. And it's a much more like wholesome part of the vertical farming space, I find. And it's really nice to have that kind of collaboration and cross inspiration from farms.
Yeah, I think that we've definitely come across farms that are very open, to sharing how they resolved problems, like, even local farms here in the Boston area. But we have also come across farms that don't even want to talk.
I think it's just a mindset of how you view business. And I was there. I was definitely in that spot in the early years where I was so focused on what other growers in my area were doing and how I can do it better. And it was good in the sense it motivated me to create a really good product.
Yep.
Uh, but at the same time, like I feel collaborating earlier on would have benefited everyone. And it's like I
Yep.
see how Mr. Beast collaborates with all these other YouTubers, and it just grows the community rather than thinking, oh, there's only so many people that will buy microgreens in the Boston area. The
Yep.
more people that know about microgreens, the more people are going to buy them. So that collaboration will have a bigger positive impact than the potential negative impact of having potentially more competition.
Yeah, I agree. I think that especially for microgreens, I think we need to be in a place where more and more people know about microgreens. It's growing, like the awareness, and it only helps, for it to grow even further.
For sure. For sure. Awesome. So I'd love to hear how you've handled or how you do handle pest and disease pressure in your microgreens production, and what kind of that has looked like, or how it's changed over time as you went from being uh, a home-based farm to a commercial facility.
So we have not had any like massive problems, and I think what helps with microgreens is they're such a short cycle, and if we stay on top of like washing and sanitizing the trays, so that would be the 10 by 20 trays and also the flood trays, the 8 by 4 flood trays. As long as, we're really staying on top of like cleaning everything, we haven't had like major problems. Um, we did actually have a few weeks of our basil crop, showing us some signs of trouble, and we're still not sure exactly what was going on because we went through, like, we consulted with you back then as well, and we consulted the greenhouse supply as well. We tried a lot of different things. Like, we thought it was an iron deficiency, so we supplemented iron. We had another time where we saw some little like flies in the basil seeds. So we got rid of those seeds and we actually let the seed manufacturer know, so that we can figure out if, it was an issue on our end or if it was an issue on their end, so that, if they need to kind of take measures. And, we kind of had to rethink how we're storing seeds as well. Um, so I think, we have had challenges. And I think it's good because it makes you rethink how you're doing things and how we can do things better. Um, we haven't had, I think huge like recurring issues. Um, and I do think like, I think that is actually something I learned from you, a while ago when we were consulting, when you had stressed the importance of washing and sanitizing the trays. Because I think we used to just power wash them. We didn't have like the sanitization step. So yeah, I think those things like definitely help keep everything, under control.
Awesome. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I guess it worked out that we spoke about disinfecting early on, that you haven't
Yep.
had to deal with that sort of issue. But where most of the disease pressure comes from, or pest pressure, is either seed or soil. So as much as the seed growers and the distributors for those seeds and the soil manufacturers want to prevent 100% of pest or disease pressure from being on those seeds or soil, it's practically impossible. So we
Yeah.
found the best sources for the seed for each variety, and it's still it helps a lot by doing that. By the way, so if you're buying generally, like, you pay what you get for most of the time. So
Yeah.
the companies that are selling seed that are not as inexpensive will generally be of better quality. Now, it's not always the case, but it's a good rule of thumb to use. And a lot of farms try to spend less money on seed and soil because it's one of the biggest input costs. So the less you,
Yeah.
in theory, you can spend on seed and soil, the more profits there will be at the end of the day. But what often ends up happening is using poor quality seed or poor quality soil will lead to not only lower yields, lower growth, but more likely to have disease pressure that will spread to every other crop that you grow at your farm. So having those practices in place early on um, will make it a lot easier to have that good quality seed and soil and preventing disease and pest outbreaks that can definitely happen on your farm. So I'd love to hear kind of the logistics of production for you. So how do you manage the planting and harvesting to meet customer demands and making sure they get done in on the right day at the right time?
Most of our orders, I would say maybe like 90% of the orders are recurring, and they recur weekly. So we kind of have the same schedule. Sometimes we make some changes based on how much we have left over. Like if we have, I don't know, like 20 trays that didn't get cut, then we kind of ballpark it at this point. So we know what orders we're gonna get, and then based on the expected yield, we have a spreadsheet of what we're supposed to plant when. Um, so I still feel like we don't have it like 100% diet. So yeah, that's what we do. We basically have a spreadsheet, um, and we have 2 harvests a week. Monday is usually a smaller harvest, and Wednesday is like our bigger harvest. Um, so yeah, that's kind of just how we do it.
Yeah, I think it's practically impossible to get an exact measurement of how much you're going to get. Like, did you? What I would say is there's a range that's good to use as a guideline for each crop, and the range is going to be slightly different depending on your environment. But there are general ranges for each crop that you should be able to get within that range in terms of yield and keeping a really high quality product. Aim, and based on my experience, is to have like a 5% window of crop yield. So you grow, let's say, 5% extra, and on the worst case scenario, you would have exactly what you need. And then in the best case scenario, you would have roughly 5% more product that you can use for samples for customers or for a sale you want to offer or whatever it may be, or to eat yourself or to give to
Yeah,
staff and volunteers, that sort of thing. Um,
yeah,
that would be, that's in my opinion the goal. I think getting smaller than a 5% window is very hard. I think it's doable, but it comes down to, is it worth the time to create the system that's going to get you like a few percent, like 1 or 2% closer to exact optimal production? And I think that starts getting into where it's just not worth the time and effort. So um, I was able to get to roughly 5%, and it'll vary, so it may not be 5% consistently, but I think that's where that sweet spot is. And for most farms, I wouldn't expect it to get there until you have many years growing experience to understand the variabilities that can affect that. Um,
yeah.
but that I think is a great goal to set for yourself as a farmer, to have some extra product, but minimize it so that there's not so much waste. And that's assuming you're having reoccurring orders, right? So if you're having orders that change weekly, that's a lot harder to manage. So having those standing orders or reoccurring subscription orders make life a lot easier as a microgreens farmer.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that you know, we've had times where we have not been able to meet the orders because we don't have enough trays. And then your harvest is basically very stressful. So Uday has been um kind of he's jumped into like the growing process and kind of making that spreadsheet recently, and he's very he wants everything to be a science. So he's trying to kind of figure out what the exact recipe should be for the rainbow mix and things like that. Like I'm the kind of person who will do eyeball things, but he wants it to be like super dialed in. And I think it makes sense. It makes your harvesting day a lot less stressful. If you have kind of a better grasp on exactly how much you're going to need. And then, I also want to have a little bit extra just in case we have some trays go bad, or if we get like, the orders that we get are a little bit bigger. So yeah, I think that sometimes it's hard to kind of balance the whole thing because, the best case scenario is you sell everything you grew. I think having some extra on hand is always um, it's important.
Yeah, for
It's like
sure.
it's peace of mind. Yeah,
And I think
yeah,
it's helpful to think of it as a science, but that also there's an art aspect to it. So um, for example, like if you know exactly what yield you're going to get, that helps to plan out. But know that there is, a lot of biology at play. That's,
yeah,
as much as I think humans want to think we figured out how plants work and soil biology, there's still so much more that we need to understand to fully grasp what is actually happening before before our eyes in plants growing and what nature is actually doing on a daily basis. But yeah, I think thinking of it as like a recipe, so having crop recipes is very helpful. So okay, this is what's optimized for this crop. Now we have what I like to call a recipe. So it's like when you cook, you can eyeball how much spice you put in, to get a
yeah,
certain flavor. But if you have it exact each time, it can be replicated. And then when you hire staff, it's more replicatable. To compare to a restaurant, if you just told someone that worked at a restaurant, you're the head chef, say, hey, just like put a sprinkle of salt and a sprinkle of paprika, it would be hard. It can very easily be misinterpreted. Where if you're like, put one exact teaspoon of salt and one exact teaspoon of paprika, then you have like a recipe that can be replicated, which is
yeah,
kind of what
yeah,
I think most restaurants try to do. But having those recipes written down, I think will help in the long run. So I'm glad that Uday is putting all that into your business and getting that going.
yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So for most farms, finding work-life balance can be quite tough. So how do you and your husband maintain a healthy work-life balance running a farm? And do you have any tips for others trying to find that balance in their farm?
Yeah, definitely. I think that one of the things about balance, especially as a microgreen farmer, I think, automating some things that you can automate is very helpful. And I think one of the first things that we bought to help save time was the harvester from Farmer's Friend. Um, so that definitely helped, make our harvesting day a lot easier. And I think the second thing that we invested in was a soil machine. So it basically breaks the bale down. It can help us mix fertilizer in, and it also fills the 10 by 20 trays. So that was like, I feel like from the perspective of saving time, um, and also making the work a lot more efficient. I think some of these investments can really help ease ease your life and have you depend less on just like doing it yourself or having someone help, and basically having your day be a whole lot longer. Um, One other thing that definitely helped us is that we ended up leasing a space that is like a 5-minute drive from our house. And while, it may not be like, the cheapest space that we have leased, it gives us a lot of peace of mind where, if we feel like we need to check on something or we might have forgotten something, we actually have like checklists for things, But if you still, you have like this itch, which we often do as business owners, we want to go back in to check on things. It's so close that it feels like, um, it's so easy. And I think that little things like that can make a huge difference in how we run the business.
For sure. And going back to the valuing your time accurately, the bigger your business gets, the more your time is worth, and the more it makes sense to have something close by. Because if you have to drive an hour to get to your farm, then like you're spending 2 hours driving every day just to go to work. And that 2 hours can be spent on so many more valuable things to do in your business. So if you're paying more for rent, but you have more time to actually run the business, obviously it depends on the specific numbers, but usually it would make more sense to have it close by and pay a little bit more, and then your time is much more freed up to actually run the business. So for anyone in that kind of space right now, that you're looking at moving your in-home farm into a facility, um, being close, especially in the first like year or two, makes such a difference. I can't remember how many times I went back and forth to Home Depot building the plumbing system. And luckily there was a Home Depot 2 minutes away. But I think about it, if I had to drive 30 minutes each way to Home Depot, it would have taken maybe an extra 5 days to a week just to build the facility
Yeah.
out, driving to Home Depot. So location is definitely important. But obviously, rent is a big factor as well, especially given how much more expensive cities are getting. Rent is a big factor, especially when you make that leap from in your being in your house to renting a commercial space. It can be a lot at once. I know it was for me, and I think it was for a lot of farms that take that leap. So there's also a cost consideration there that there's a balancing act between the two to find what would be the best fit. Um, Now, in terms of what your personal favorite microgreen is, I'd love to hear what you and your husband kind of consume on a weekly basis, and what your favorites are to consume.
Um, so we really like micro broccoli. Um, and actually, after you mentioned that, it's good to get like a diversity of microgreens into your diet, I'm definitely going to look into something like getting more of the rainbow mix home or the salad mix. But we're sold on the broccoli. It goes into our morning smoothie. So we do a protein smoothie. Um, and so every day we basically have like, I think, a couple of ounces of the micro broccoli in our smoothie. So we love that. And then we also like the arugula just because it's so bold, and we love adding that on. We do a lot of like pizza at home. Um, so I think arugula is amazing on
Yeah,
pizza. So those are
awesome.
like our favorites.
Awesome. Yeah. The flavor of micro arugula, for anyone that hasn't tried it, it's crazy how if you like arugula. Now I know some people don't necessarily like arugula, but if you like arugula, micro arugula is very, very special. The flavor is
Yes.
like I could just eat handfuls of it. That's how much I love the flavor of it.
That's
Did you
that's
have any?
exactly
Sorry,
that's
go ahead.
exactly what I tell our customers, that if you like arugula, like micro arugula is gonna blow your mind.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely does. Before I actually started farming, I had an office job and I grew cherry tomatoes in my backyard and brought them for people there, and seeing their reaction to consuming like a real cherry tomato that's grown, that's sweet, that's tender, and the tanginess that you just don't get from, the average store-bought tomato. I would
Yes.
love to do the same thing with micro arugula and just kind of like go like those like videos you see on the street where they interview people just give them a
Uh-huh.
handful of Microgreens and just look at their reaction. I think it would be very interesting to see what people's reactions are, because it really does blow your mind when you try it for the first time.
It's very special.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Um, so, like, as a microgreen business owner, is there a single, a single challenge that you overcame that just stands out, that you that was like a difficult problem to overcome, and kind of how you overcame that?
I realized that even though I don't have a sales background, I am pretty much like a salesperson, right? And I think that sometimes we have to change who we are to kind of help the business grow. And I think we grow as people too. That kind of um, change or evolution is like ongoing. With somebody who's running a business, you kind of have to um, become like this person who can do whatever it takes to make the business keep moving ahead. So I think that is probably something that I wouldn't say is behind me. I think it's like ongoing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, running any sort of business can be very, very humbling from like a self-reflection perspective, but from the aspect of business sales, I think for most people, it's very intimidating, to like go and just like pitch your product to a store and know that there is a chance that you're going to be rejected. I find the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. Sometimes you can go to a store and the produce manager is just having a bad day, and then you can go back
Yeah.
2 days later and be like, oh yeah, I remember you, and you're like very confused. You're like, wait, what? So it sometimes like some people have very stressful jobs, and often we think it's about us, which it can be, but to recognize if someone says no, to just try to get feedback and then grow as a salesperson or as a business owner, and try to learn from that experience, I think is very, very valuable. And then you get better, and then it gets easier each time you do it.
Yeah, for sure. It gets easier. And I think that, we're scared, but I think that one of two things could happen. You could get rejected or that account could change your life. So you have to go and do it, right? And
Yeah.
it does get easier and you get better at it too. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
it's great you put it that way, because there's been a few very big accounts that I've gotten over the years, and the Pareto principle seems to work out. I don't think 80/20 is necessarily the percentages I've seen, but it's generally like a majority or close to a majority of sales you can get from one distributor, one customer, and you would never know unless you play the numbers game and go and keep improving your skills in sales, and then you get that one customer that, like you said, will change the trajectory of your business, and you'll never know if that's out there unless you go out and try to get those sales.
that's right.
Yeah. So this is my favorite question to ask farmers: is if you can go back in time, to the day you started your farm and meet the younger version of yourself, what advice would you give her to set yourself up for success?
That's a good one. I think that, some of the things that we did when the business was starting, they worked out really well for us in the sense that I think one of the things that was done right in the beginning was setting up a subscription model. I think another thing that we probably got right was, trying to cut our learning curve by consulting with other farms that, did want to consult and kind of share the knowledge. Um, so I think a couple of things, really, really helped us kind of move ahead and have kind of like a good foundation. I think the other thing that we probably could have done that would have helped us, like especially when we were transitioning from the house into like a leased space, is I think that it would help to like secure some large accounts, so that when you move, you kind of are, you have kind of like a good footing. Um, So we did have like a subscription model, and so we had that base, but I think that we kind of underestimated, um, you know, like how strong our foundation needs to be. We thought we were starting out strong. So I think that if I were to do this all over again, I would still do it. Like I would still love to do this because I'm enjoying what I'm doing. But I would definitely try to secure like some larger accounts like chain retail or more distributors.
For sure. I think
Yeah.
that's really great advice for people. I was in the same boat where I expanded. I had some sales, but I didn't have enough to make it profitable those first few months of after the expansion. Now, obviously, the farm got there, and so did yours. But having that foundation of having like pent up demand that you can't meet just yet with new customers, whether it's wholesalers or even just having more subscription customers at that point, just have enough that you know that it'll get to the point of profitability a lot sooner than it would if you just expanded then went to go out sales. Because once you expand, your focus is on building out the facility. So having the sales already there just makes it much less stressful, because then you're like, okay, I'm building out this facility for sales I know I have, rather than building out a facility that it's like maybe I'm going to have sales, and then even just the idea of that can be very stressful during that time period. That's already
Yeah.
a very difficult time period for a business to go through, going through like a large expansion in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
awesome. So it's been great having you on the podcast and sharing your story. And if other farms or people listening want to connect and learn more about yourself or your farm, where can they find you guys online and on social media?
So our website is giantgorillagreens.com. And we're on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok with the same name at Giant Gorilla Greens.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm actually heading out to the Boston area next month, and I'm actually going to do a video tour of Giant Gorilla Greens farm, and I'm really excited to share that with everyone. They have a really cool facility, and to show you the process and what it looks like to have a commercial facility be your farm rather than being an in-home farm. So I think it'll be really valuable for a lot of the listeners here. So feel free to check that out. That'll be on YouTube some point in early November. And I think it'll be really, really valuable for those wanting to start a farm or those that have a smaller scale farm. So I'm very, very excited for that. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story today.
Thank you, Jonah. It was a great conversation, and we are super excited to host you at our farm.
Awesome. Me too. Thanks for tuning in to the Microgreens Mastery Podcast. To access a wealth of insights, just click the subscribe button, stay notified about each new episode, and enjoy all of this wisdom for free. If you're ready to supercharge your microgreens business, visit microgreensconsulting.com for a gold mine of guides and resources. We've transformed thousands of microgreens businesses, and you're invited to join the success story. Let's stay connected. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Microgreens Consulting for exclusive content and expert tips and wisdom. If you found this episode insightful, please leave us a review, spread the word, and let's share microgreens magic with the world. Until next time, let curiosity fuel your growth, and may happiness be your harvest. Happy growing, everyone.